Welcome in to Texans on Tap. I'm Brandon Strange with Charlie Palillo and Josh Jordan. Read their work on sportsmap.com and follow them on X at Palillo and at Josh Jordan 975. Click like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Click that bell for notifications so that you know every time new content drops, and so that you're along for the ride with this and this exciting, what we hope to be a very exciting and productive 2024 Texans season. Gents, the final preseason game in the books, not the prettiest of games. Texans eke out the win over the Rams, finish the preseason 3-1 in a season. Preseason results really don't matter, but it does give us a chance to see some guys on the margins. Some of those guys showed us some stuff today. Cam Akers comes out and shows us some more moves today. Didn't really love the amount that they played Cam Akers, especially for a guy who has been so productive in this preseason. And I would think, just as a fan looking in, a real big contender for that backup quarterback role. Another guy who flashed a little bit was British Brooks. Where do you see, do you think Cam is going to wrestle that backup running back position away from Damien Pierce, who we didn't see today? And where do you see a guy like British Brooks fitting into this offense, or maybe perhaps landing a spot here?
Greatest thing about preseason NFL, its conclusion, especially if you're Cam Akers, who, if there's a story of the Texans preseason, he's the one coming off of a couple of Achilles tears, pretty much winner by knockout. I think for the number 2 running back job. The Damien Pierce didn't even dress for the preseason finale. That can cut a couple of ways. Either the die is cast, they know that they're cutting him, or maybe they're shopping him and don't risk injuring him, because if you get a 7th round draft pick back, it's a little something for Nick Cassera to have as a future trade chip. But Akers plays and then flourishes. If the three of us, and for space reasons and lack of grace reasons, if the three of us each did one pirouette, would that count as equaling Cam Akers on that 4th and 3 catch and spinorama times 3? He showed flash. He showed burst. He shows good health coming out of the preseason. I don't see how he's not Joe Mixon's first alternate. And then you have the roster decisions to be made. Pierce or Ogunbowale. If Andrew Beck is healthy, he makes the 53-man as the fullback. If not, that gives them a roster spot to play with at the running spot. And that's where British Brooks could be the beneficiary.
Yeah, for me, Cam Akers. That's all that I care about here. This guy has to make the team. And unless the Texans coaches, their eyes don't work, then Cam Akers needs to be on this football team. And Aaron Wilson put out an article earlier today about how, Damien Pierce, didn't play today, and that should be regarded as a positive. The team feels good about him. They're taking a big picture approach. And I'm just kind of like, well, the big picture was last year when he was terrible also. That's part of the approach, too, that they need to factor in here. So I think it's a massive mistake if they don't keep Cam Akers. And it should be a no-brainer, but I see him in there in the 4th quarter of the last preseason game. I don't know if it's a lock he makes the team, which it sounds crazy coming out of my mouth.
I mean, due respect to anyone's opinion, we all are entitled to one. But that Pierce not playing means that all's well in Pierce land, and that he's a lock to be on the team, and they're looking at the bigger picture. What evidence would there be to support that he is a safety guy for the roster after the last season and a preseason in which, yes, running behind addled and second-team offensive lines for the most part, but he showed little, right? He didn't show any of the scoot, the tackle break, basically shown nothing since his rookie season. Cam Akers showed way more in any individual preseason game in which he played than Damien Pierce has cumulatively over the last year plus. So unless they think Cam Akers is a ticking time bomb for a 3rd Achilles tear, how would he not get the nod over Pierce? Now, if you're going to keep Pierce over Ogunbowale, is Pierce going to contribute on coverage teams, special teams? Looks like kickoff return coverage might not be very important. But if you're going to be on punt cover teams, Damien Pierce, no one confuses him with White Shoes Johnson as a kickoff return threat. And you have a Steven Sims. Desmond King didn't exactly endorse his candidacy for the punt return with the muff in this game. But of course, Damien Pierce makes this team. Of course not, to hold that opinion.
Yeah, and look, I know it's preseason and you can't read too much into the results, but Pierce looked like the same productivity or lack thereof that we saw out of him last year. We were seeing reflected in the preseason. Conversely to that, Cam Akers showed us a lot. I mean, I can think of a handful of plays out of the game against the Rams in which really stand out to me, whether it's finishing that play where he put that he had that long run and put that hit on Jason Taylor at the end of the run, or in the third quarter when D'Amico inserts him into that fourth down run where he has a triple spin move to get the first down. Like, there's just a lot of things you can think off the top of the head where Cam really separated himself from a lot of the offensive guys who are on the margins. Another guy that's on the margins has been John Mechie. We've seen him put a couple of nice plays together on tape during the preseason. What's your optimism level for John Mechie this season amongst an already stacked wide receiving core?
2 games in a row, Mechie showed well. And frankly, because of the way preseason football is played, the cumulative work through his practices and the joint practices likely counts at least as much as what you do in the games. But as a second-round pick just 3 drafts ago and a season removed from conquering leukemia, I think he gets benefit of the doubt. Obviously, your 3 starters are locked in with Nico Collins and Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell. I think you have 3 spots to work with. Mechie looking pretty good for 1. If they're going to carry Robert Woods for his veteranness and the multi-million dollars of salary cap space that he consumes, right? Not that you need the space for 2024, but it would be extra money you have to work with going toward 2025. But is there still more comfort level with Woods over, say, Xavier Hutchinson, if Noah Brown is safe to make the team? And talking about the return game, the kickoff return element, even with the new rules, is just not going to be a big deal. If the field is too compressed, that even if there's a higher percentage of kickoff returns, that having a dynamic kickoff returner is still so much minimized from what it was years ago. Well, why would you carry both Pierce and Sims? So maybe Steven Sims gets lost in a numbers game there at receiver. Either of those guys might have a chance to latch on with another team. But I don't think the Texans should be chewing down their fingernails in terms of the coaching staff, the front office, that, oh no, if someone signs Damien Pierce, as opposed to us being able to keep him on the practice squad as a depth guy, should someone go down with an injury. You can always find depth guys off the waiver wire, off another team's practice squad, with those up to now, 16, 17 players.
Yeah, and Xavier Hutchinson kind of showed up again today, 4 catches for 34 yards. He had some, a little bit of flashes last year, so we'll see. Noah Brown and Robert Woods. I don't know where they're going to go with this here. I think with Mechie, maybe it's about, big picture with him, because, I mean, how much are these guys going to contribute with Diggs and Nico and Tank this season? So I almost wonder if, maybe it's something going forward. But of course, Mechie, he wasn't a first-round pick, so it's only a 4-year deal. He already, missed the season because of the leukemia. So maybe it's not a big picture thing with him, but he's a second-round pick. He's got talent. You wonder if they favor youth a little bit with him, and he makes it. But, big picture, the point is these guys aren't going to do a whole lot unless there's some kind of injury, or maybe we're looking forward to next season when Diggs isn't with the team anymore. But it's nice to have options, right? But you wonder, I mean, we haven't seen Noah Brown at all. We haven't seen much from Woods. These guys have just been kind of out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, I view Dell as a likely guy, frankly, to miss time somewhere during the course of the season because he's just so darn small. So I think your number 4, number 5 wide receivers will see some time. Right, the Texans will have some 4 wideout packages, but how they allocate roster spots. We touched upon this a week ago. You really need to carry 3 quarterbacks on your 53-man roster. Story out that if the Texans cut Case Keenum, Green Bay may have interest as a backup to Jordan Love. Okay, good for Case Keenum if he would want to go up to Wisconsin to be Love's backup. I don't think it means the Texans would need to carry Tim Boyle. Davis Mills is a solid number 2, unless there's a lingering issue with his ribs. And obviously, it's C.J. Stroud or bust for the Texans' upside hopes this season. So if they're really on the fence, do we carry a 7th wide receiver because of special teams return reasons? Do we want to squeeze out one more spot for a running back? Quarterback, to me, you could go with 2 on your active roster. On the offensive side, if you go 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, that's 12. They're carrying 3 tight ends with Dalton Schultz, and Brevin Jordan, and Cade Stover as a draft choice taken 3rd round. He's making the team. Then I presume you want to go with at least 9 offensive linemen. So that gets you to 24 players. Then how do you want to lump them together? A kicker in Fairbairn, a punter in Townsend, and the long snapper in Weeks. So that gets you to 27 players. Defensive side, you're carrying at least 7 defensive linemen, at least 7 linebackers. I think likely at least 9 defensive backs. And then that leaves you 2-3 roster spots. Where do you want to squeeze out one more in which position group?
I also don't think, going back to Pierce, I don't think it's an indictment if Pierce goes somewhere else and flourishes, because it just seems clear he's not a good fit for this system. The unknown still does seem to be what Joe Mixon looks like in this season. So hopefully we'll get that answer in week 1. But I want to circle back to quarterback, Charlie, because this is probably as sloppy as we've seen Case Keenum look in a game in some time, and then he leaves the game injured. So that's not good. Tim Boyle did have some decent drives. If they do keep 3 quarterbacks, is this a closer competition for the 3rd quarterback spot than we originally thought?
Probably, because I don't think anyone would have envisioned a scenario where Tim Boyle makes the team. And that furthers my point that I would just go with 2. That Tim Boyle, okay, he's been around for a couple of preseasons and he knows the system. But if you're playing your 3rd string quarterback, the doo-doo is probably pretty deep. So I just would not prioritize that as a roster spot if I'm really working hard to decide, do I keep 1 extra defensive back, or 1 more running back, or 1 more defensive lineman until Danico Autry comes back from his 6-game suspension?
Yeah, I'm cool with 2. I'm with Charlie on that. I'm fine there. Case Keenum, I almost feel like his biggest value is just being in the meeting rooms with CJ Stroud and with the other coaches doing game prep, stuff like that. I think that's really the thing he contributes the most. And back to your point about Pierce, Brandon, like he's even worse than I realized. He averaged 2.9 yards per attempt last season. That was on 145 carries. I mean, under 3 yards a carry. I mean, that's just awful.
Well, he was barely over 1 yard per carry the last 2 preseason games. So again, it's not bagging on Damien Pierce, who every account is he's just a delightful young guy. He's popular in the locker room, but he's not a team leader. You can't lead when you're not a good enough player. And the Texans are solid now. And they don't need to cling to any guy who shows leadership and positive human characteristics. They're all set there. Are you good enough between the lines on Sundays? Or now with the Texans on Mondays or Thursdays or Wednesdays, and specifically versus Cam Akers, what is the beginning of an argument for Damien Pierce over him? So it's 3rd back or 4th back, or you just move on and wish him the best.
And just going on to defense, we saw Desmond King muff that punt early in the game. I don't know how much this impacts. He's already a guy that was on the margins. He's been on the margins. We saw them bring him back late last season. Any thoughts on on maybe Desmond King, or just general thoughts on defense we saw in the preseason finale?
Not so much the preseason finale, but merely as a guess, I'm going to say the Texans cut one of the veteran defensive backs that they signed. And if I was going to throw one name, I'll say CJ Henderson doesn't make the team at corner. And again, not that he played a lot in the games, but the raves are there about Kamari Lassiter. So he's their number 2 corner, paired with Derek Stingley Jr. You're going to carry at least 2, maybe 3 more. So among guys like King and Jeff Okudah, CJ Henderson in there, do they all make the team? And then you throw in at the safety spot, Lonnie Johnson digged against the Rams. Does he make it for his 2nd go round? They signed Mike Ford away from the Browns. Eric Murray's been around here for years. It seems pretty clear Jimmy Ward is going to make the team. So all those safeties can't stick. Right? You're not going to carry 12 defensive backs.
Yeah, and with Petrie playing some in the nickel there, does that make King really not that necessary? And we have to keep in mind they cut King last year, but they ended up bringing him back. So there was something about him that they deemed him not worthy of making the roster last season. You have to wonder if that'll happen again this year.
And I omitted Kalen Bullock, who's obviously a lock. And I think is going to wind up seeing time at safety, whether it's because he flashes so well or Jimmy Ward almost inevitably gets hurt.
All right. Well, I'll give you guys the final word, final thoughts from the Texans preseason.
They suffered, and due respect to any of the individuals, and it's one of the worst things. In the last preseason game, you have guys fighting to make the team, but you have a bunch of guys who really have no chance to make the team. And you have a guy like Brandon Hill get carted off. Now, if it's a season-ending injury, he'll get paid as a result. But it's still terrible when you see guys go down like that. But among the material Texans, right, the core of this team, which going into a season makes it as legitimate a Super Bowl contender or AFC Championship contender as they've ever had. They've not had a substantial player go down. Like take the Colts, right? Opening day, they will not have to be guarding against the pass rush of Samson Ebukam, right, who blew out Achilles early in the preseason. So I think it's been a tremendously positive for the Texans preseason, and now they have 17 games to live up to the hype.
Yeah, I'll echo that sentiment. Nice to see not any of the big main guys dealing with some kind of injury that they suffered in a preseason game. That's huge. The one thing I'm going to keep my eye on is with Will Anderson. He's been not playing, limited with an ankle injury. They don't really have to talk about that stuff this time of year, but just in my mind, I'm like, is this that same ankle that he was dealing with in the postseason last year? Like, is he still dealing with some issue from that injury, or is it a different ankle? Or is it a brand new injury? I don't know, but I'm just curious. I hope it's not a lingering effect with the player that young bringing an injury from last season into this year.
My final thoughts on the preseason is to quote Josh Jordan: Cam Akers, Cam Akers, Cam Akers. D'Amico, please, Cam Akers. That's going to be it for this episode of Texans on Tap. Just a reminder, we will be reacting to every game this season live following the conclusion of each game. So make sure you're subscribed to us here on Sports Map Texans if you're not already, because we want you to join us all season for that. And you don't have to wait that long to get your Houston sports fix. Just make sure you're subscribed to this channel and then also our other YouTube channel, our sister channel, Sports Map Houston. The three of us will have a brand new episode of our Houston Astros podcast called Stone Cold Stros on Monday. We hope to see you there. Until next time, go Texans.